Hello and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. Polish uniformed services have secured the wreckage of at least 16 Russian drones that crashed onto Polish territory in the early hours of Wednesday in what officials described as a large-scale provocation by Moscow. As one might imagine, theories abound about how and why this happened. Well, to get some clarity on the implications of this strike from the Ukrainian perspective, we're joined by Bohdan Nahaylo, editor-in-chief of the Kyiv Post, who's just flown in from Kiev to be with us live. Bohdan, welcome. Good to see you in person.
Kumar, I'm delighted to be here. I wish I'd flown in, but as you know, the airspace is still blocked.
Oh,
so
right.
I had to take a train.
You had to take, okay. Well, you're here now.
I'm here, yes.
That's the important thing.
Right.
So tell us, first of all, how was this reported, this incursion of Russian drones into Polish airspace? How was this reported in Ukraine?
In different ways. Basically, it's not come as a shock because Ukrainian spokespersons have been warning that, look, there will be provocations, and while Trump prevaricates and hesitates, Russia will be probing to see what it can get away with. To what extent is the West dependent on a green light to move more forcefully and more, shall we say, meaningfully than before in defending itself, but also giving Ukraine the help? That's one thing. But the second things are that this is seen as a brazen provocation which targets Poland at the moment, but could target the Baltic countries next, just as a few years ago it targeted Romania. And the message is, we know where your NATO bases are. It's not just Poland. We know that at Rzeszów, at the airport, you know that military supplies from the West are arriving and are being transported to Ukraine. We know all that. So look, you know, if America continues to back off, we will do what we want regardless of what you may say, your political statements, your show of concern, etc.
Right, okay. And so just to be clear, the Ukrainian attitude is, well, it's clearly a provocation. It wasn't accidental that the drones came into Polish airspace.
Absolutely, but look, one, yes. Two, yes. We've had these incidents before with Romania and with Poland, but not, over 10, 18, 16, whatever the number is. Clearly, there's a pattern there, and many of these drones went quite far into Poland. It wasn't just the tip of the frontier region. It's a signal, and it's a signal. We'll do what we want unless America gets its act together, and we don't know what the reason is that's still stopping Trump, whether they've got the deeds on him from before, whether it's his mental attitude, his advisors, etc. But the reluctance of Trump to actually move forcefully and back Europe up at this moment and to be still a decisive player within NATO, this is of course encouraging Putin. And remember, he's just back from China. He feels great. He feels he's got China, India, Iran, North Korea all behind him.
Right. Well, Trump has certainly been very vague up to now on the topic. Now, interesting thing was the response to these drones. So, of course, there were air defenses, but there was a multinational force of fighter jets that went out to intercept. So Netherlands, Italian, jets. So this was perhaps, it could be seen as a test of the ability of these NATO countries to actually work together. What do you think? Were they successful?
Look, whether they were successful or not is not so important. The point is it sent a signal, and it perhaps marks a turning point, because this is the first time that NATO forces have responded in such a way collectively, not unilaterally, to a perceived threat. And it shows that there has been not just a provocation, but this provocation has accelerated, if you want, NATO's realization that it's got to get its act together.
Right.
Either it's serious or it's not.
Right.
And seeing that the Americans are still standing on the sidelines under Trump, we don't know what might happen in 2 or 3 years. I'm not saying America has given up on Europe, but under this administration, temporarily it has. And so NATO forces have to, be seen to be serious about their own defense.
Right. Well, this certainly is perhaps a step in the right direction, and of course, Poland has activated Article 4, which means that they've required a meeting with other NATO countries to decide on their responses, which is again perhaps we see a firming up of the NATO response.
Firming up, and they've called for a Security Council meeting, as I understand.
Right.
Etc. Look, if the bottom line is that it's another but far more serious wake-up call, then this will boomerang back as far as Russia's concerned. It will backfire. If the bottom line is that the NATO countries can agree on extending defense of airspace at least into Ukraine, realizing that Ukraine may be a buffer zone. It may be the zone where the fighting is taking place. But implicitly, the front line is where the EU border meets Ukraine. And this is how Russia is treating it. So extend that air coverage, defend the skies over Ukraine without necessarily, provoking Russia more, but just say, no, this nonsense has to stop because it's dangerous for us.
Right. Right. So this might actually be a trigger for that to move forward.
That's why, there's a negative side, but maybe, as I say, it's a wake-up call. Maybe this is the factor that will precipitate a more meaningful response.
Understood. Now, there are channels of information which say that actually these were drones that were fired from Ukraine into Poland. Now, to most people, that would seem a ridiculous proposition, but it seems not.
It seems not, if you are to be cynical and to imagine that the Ukrainians desperately want the West to support them because they are under threat themselves. But, I think it's very clear that at this stage, where, let's say, Polish-Ukrainian relations are again not as superb as they was a while back, this kind of provocation from the Ukrainian side, I think, would not be acceptable, because, if the truth came out that this was the case, it would more than backfire. It would really mess things up for the foreseeable future, not only with Poland, but with its allies. And, the Orbáns and Ficos of this world will be saying, we told you so, look at them, etc., etc.
So where is this information coming from?
Oh, well, somebody is leaking it, and who is the concerned party? Who stands to gain from it? So I think, look at that, and I think you get your answer. But look, today, as I said, I think I told you as we were coming in, the early polls suggested that 38% of the Poles who were asked thought that it was a Ukrainian provocation, masked. So Moscow is being quite successful in getting this message across, that Ukraine should be written off. They're desperate. They'll do anything now to get money, weapons, etc. Look, leave them. This is our backyard. Get on with your own business. Deal with the EU. Deal with Germany, immigrants, migration issues, etc. Belarus.
Right.
We shouldn't leave Belarus out of the picture, because there were these rumors that Belarusian officials had tipped off the Poles about drones heading their way, and today suddenly we see 52 political prisoners released. Some game is going on behind the scenes.
Yes, there certainly seems to be. We know that the Ukrainian authorities or military actually informed the Poles that that this was happening and to be wary of it. But what do you see into this release of 52 political prisoners, some of whom were Poles? Is this a way of saying, well, sorry about that, bit of an accident, here we go, we'll release some prisoners?
Well, a large group are foreigners, not just Poles. I think there's an American included and others. The fact is that Lukashenko has gone on record today as saying, this is as a result of Trump reaching out to me. He's trying to get the credit that he's important, that Trump is speaking directly to Belarus, and that this is a trade-off. And he even said today, as he's quoted, that, well, we really don't need these so-called political prisoners, so-called hostages, but I tried to quote correctly, let's reach a global agreement, meaning, what are you going to give us in return? So that I am a vassal of Putin, but what can you offer me in return? And this goes over the head of Poland or Lithuania or Ukraine. This is Lukashenko trying to act as if he's got a personal dialogue going with Trump, and therefore looks good, looks important, is not just a minion, in the hands of Putin.
Right. Well, okay, I mean, let's just follow that thought for a second. He's a minion of Putin's, fine, but then does that follow that Putin instructed him to release these prisoners, and if so, why?
Look, Lukashenko has been more or less consistent in 80% of cases, but sometimes he goes off, on a wild goose chase of his own, because I think it's not so much that he's trying to defend Belarus as such as a state, but his own image as an important personality, indispensable negotiator.
So this is off his own bat?
Yes. Okay. Look, he's not getting any younger, he's not getting any healthier from his appearances. He knows his days are probably numbered. He wants to go out with good grace, so he's reaching out desperately to see what he can get, because he's been isolated even more perhaps than even Putin.
Well, that's true. I mean, you can't ignore Putin, but you can more easily ignore Lukashenko, I think. Unfortunately, Bohdan, we've run out of time, which is a terrible shame. I wish we had longer. But thank you again for coming into the studio today.
My pleasure, Kumar.
Thank you. And that brings us to the end of this episode of World Talks. Don't go away, there are lots more coming up. Goodbye.